Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to this episode of Financial Tides. Today we are joined by my lovely fiance and the other woman in my life, my mother, Marlon. My fiance's name is Lauren, and we are going to be talking about managing the finances as a couple. So we asked them to join us today to kind of give their perspective and add what has worked for us and some funny stories that we've dealt with in the relationship together. So without further ado, John, tell us a little bit about the importance of being open and honest when communicating about finances in your relationship and
Thank you, Taylor.
relationships in general.
Thank you very much, Steve. And hello, everyone. Um, you know, I don't need to tell anybody this, but the divorce in America is at all-time highs. Gray divorce or silver divorce is soaring now. And the reason younger divorce is not as high is because then a lot of people are not getting married. So they're together, they're having a kid, and then 4 years later they separate, but there's no divorce involved. But divorce rates, 40% of divorces are due to financial problems. When you choose to do life with someone, there's some scary conversations you'll have about money over time. It's important to discuss these things before you get married, before you're in a relationship, and throughout the relationship. And the reason we have our significant others here is you're going to hear a little bit from them about, some of the obstacles we had 30 years ago and some of the ways we work through it. And we're still, money is not something we argue about, but it's something that still is out there, where decisions have to be made. Do we stay at the Marriott or do we stay at the Motel 6, So I think we both like the Marriott better, though. Anyway, Taylor, why don't you pick up on some other
Yeah,
important things for you?
yeah. I think it's important for everyone to understand that there's different aspects in life and there's different goals. And a lot of times coming into a relationship, there's different goals. Lauren and I were not 100% on the same page with everything we wanted to do right off the bat. So I think having those conversations, figuring out kind of what your views are of money, whether you view it as a tool or a means to the end, or whether you're really valuing other things higher than money, whether you're saying, hey, time with the family, travel, being with your friends and family and time off is really the big deals to you. I think that could conflict in a relationship if one of those is more important and the other person just feels like, hey, I just want to go out and make a bunch of money. And I think also knowing kind of who's the spender and who's the saver in the relationship, or if you're both savers or you're both spenders. But if those kinds of conflict, I think it's really important to being open and honest with each other so that you're both not getting frustrated in the overall situation, in particular with finances. So, John, what are some of those tips that couples can use to make that safe space for having that conversation in an open and honest way?
Yeah, I think you have to speak about things early before it comes to a loggerhead. I think about some of the times over the years where someone came up to me and said, "Look, I've got something I need to talk to you about, but you got to promise me you can't tell my wife. I've got this debt burden that I had since I meant to tell her before we got married, and I meant to tell her after we got married." I said, "Wait a minute, you're married 10 years now." And they're still carrying that debt burden, so you want to get to these things earlier is better. And it's real hard to go back and say, "Oh, by the way, I have this debt and look how old it is." So communication, I think communication is the key with everything. It's the key with spousal relationships, client advisor relationships, football coaches and their players. It's all about communication. And I think with money, it's certainly a communication issue. And with that, I'd like Marlon and Laura now to take over and talk about a few things that in the relationships that have made their conversations either easier or more difficult, for that matter. Why don't we start with Lauren?
Okay. So a time where I feel like comes to mind right away is like when Taylor and I first started dating. Obviously, he was already a financial advisor and I was still in school. So like financially, we were both on very different levels. And so I think having that conversation early kind of just really paved the way and made things a lot less uncomfortable. And even though it was like a little awkward to bring up, like, hey, I'm still in school, like financially, I'm not on the same page as you are whatsoever. Like having that discussion early, and then Taylor, with his financial background, it was really helpful and kind of helped develop a plan going forward.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that on my end I tried to make sure that I did is not being judgmental of anyone in any place, because it doesn't really matter where you currently are financially. It matters where you want to get financially. And I think that having an open conversation about how we can help each other get there and how we could work as a team to get there really helped us come together and feel safe to have those conversations.
Good.
What
And
about
Marlon,
you,
what?
Mom?
Yeah, Marlon.
Well, we came from a completely different scenario at the time because we were both pretty much starting out. So I was the income earner at the time, and Dad was the one that was in school. So I was kind of making my own financial decisions at that point in time. And then as our relationship went on over the years, the role kind of switched because he became the earner in the home, and I stayed home to take care of the kids. And so one of our big situations that we had back then was we had joint account, and it was working out really well. And then when we had the kids and I wasn't making money anymore, or as much money anymore, I was, I'd go to the store, I'd purchase things, and I didn't log the receipts into the checkbook, and then he would get the statement, and it wasn't a good thing. And I wasn't doing it intentionally or anything, but it was just, I was busy with the kids. And so we decided that it would be best for us to each have our own checking account, and that we would make sure that I watched my checking account and he watched his, but the accounts were connected. It wasn't like we were hiding anything from each other.
They were both joint
like
accounts. We
They
had
were, yeah.
two joint accounts.
Yeah. So that kind of took a little bit of our monthly bit of an argument at the end of every month as to what was going on. And I wasn't overdrafting the account or anything like that. I was still staying within my means, but he, being the financial planner, is one that wants everything documented and wants to make sure that the checkbook's balanced and stuff. And I just was overwhelmed with the receipts. So, but you make things work out as you move along in life and see how your finances go and see the adjustments that are necessary.
Yeah, and now, she pays a lot of big bills for the household from her checkbook, but doesn't have the income level to support that. So when I log into our bank accounts, I see that her account's starting to get down to, 2 months worth of bills, and I fill it up to 6 months again, and then I don't have to worry about it. And so, unless she asks for me to look it over or do something, or, she sees, something that, my account's down or whatever. So it's communication again.
Yes.
And then, I think the other biggest thing is budgeting, and everybody that knows me knows that one of the first things I'll always say when they say, "Can I retire?" I'll say, "What's your budget look like?" And not what do your assets look like, what's your budget look like? Because that's an easy one, right? And I'll go back to handing that off to you, Taylor. But one of the reasons I like to ask that is, if the person says, "Well, I make 100 a year and my budget's 120," well, you can't retire. I don't care how much you have, because you've got. Well, it depends on how much you have, but can we back that up, Josh? Let's start that over again, the budget part.
Yep, go for it.
Okay. So the big thing for me is about the budget. If you got the budget down, whether you can retire, whether you can go away every year, you can take care of everything you need. So what's the benefit of working on that budget together, Taylor?
Yeah, so I think that it's really important to have a joint budget. And I think that we've talked about it. And as we start to merge our assets, we're not completely merged yet, but living together, we do share a lot of assets, and there's household assets and everything. I think very quickly at the beginning, when we did that, it was really easy to see the tragedy of commons start taking effect, of when there's two people spending money out of the account instead of one. you're not exactly knowing what the other side of it is spending and who's paying what bill, who went grocery shopping earlier in the week. So I think that sitting down and actually talking about those items and laying out what we wanted to spend on, what reoccurring bills we have every month that are going to go out and what dates those are going out, and really being aware of that. And I think that's the key word there, is awareness of what the other one's spending and what bills you have together, really sheds a lot of light and helps kind of that financial picture come together, rather than having more of a segregated asset or segregated income picture of what you can actually spend.
Yeah, and
And then,
you know, earlier I mentioned that, you know, I stuff her checkbook with money. It's not really like that. So what we did was we set the bills up to go auto pay out of my checking where my pay goes. And then Marlon pretty much uses her credit card to take care of all the incidentals, Costco, the groceries, major items we need, you know, and then if her credit card's bigger, that is starting to look big, she'll say, "Hey, by the way, I charged this. I paid for all the hotels. I took care of all that for vacation. So I'm gonna have a big credit card bill this month." And I'm like, "Okay, how big?" And then maybe it requires another transfer. So, but for the most part, our division of bills has evolved over the last 30 years into the master checkbook. You know, being the one that all the income goes into and the bills come out of there. So, you know, if we go into a Rip Van Winkle sleep for 90 days, the mortgages are paid and everything's taken care of and the phones are still working.
yeah, and I think that's a really great segue into our next topic, which is really dividing financial responsibilities and tasks. And I think Lauren jokingly around the house and different tasks that we do, whether they're chores or anything, always says, that's a blue job. You're handling that, right? That's a blue job. I'm pink. And then there's items around the house that are pink jobs that she handles. So financial responsibility, just because of my background, has tended to fall on me for the most part. And talking about the conversations and keeping Lauren included in them is a big part of our relationship. But John, tell us a little bit about how you guys divide the financial responsibility. I know you touched on it a little bit, but kind of elaborate on how you guys go about that.
I wanted to talk about, you know, when you said blue and pink jobs, I wanted to talk about who uses the hammer and who uses the dustpan, but we'll stick to the financial part. So, you know, clearly, you know, say we're both savers to some degree. So when it comes to financial responsibilities, we have similar mindset, and so I don't think we really get into any kind of battles over whether something needs to be done. We might have a different approach of how it needs to be done and when it needs to be done. We had a conversation this morning. I won't get into what it was about, but it was a conversation about a financial item we want to tackle, and I thought we should tackle it now, and Marlon thinks we should tackle it later. And she's got good reasons for it, you know. And so I started to think it through, and I thought it through on the way in this morning, and said, "Yeah, I think I'm going to tackle that, you know, in the spring or the summer, you know." And because we've got other things we want to take care of first, I had to reprioritize the major ticket items I have coming up, and that was what I did this morning. So that's how we kind of divide and conquer.
Yeah, and I think that in most relationships, we've touched on this, it tends to be a saver and a spender. It's almost a law of compatibility that there's a saver and a spender, and they come together and they find each other and they live happily ever after, figuring out how to balance out each other in the relationship. So I think that these mindsets really come into play, and you figure out that balance in the relationship so that one doesn't spend the money completely recklessly or anything. So I think that a lot of people get caught up on the saver side of things, and they said, "Oh, the saver's always the right person. They're saving and they're making sure that the future is set up." And that is true in life, and that it's an important part to make sure your future is secure too. But I think it's really also important that you have the spender in life, because it keeps life fun. It's rewarding to be able to do some of those fun things and go on a trip and go on a vacation, and just kind of aligning with both enjoying your life now and enjoying your life in the future. I don't think that when we look at the financial picture, we're always encouraging our clients to make sure your finances are in order, but enjoy life along the way. Don't work until you're 65 and dread going to work every day and dread your life and not have any fun along the way and end up in a situation where you get to the end and you're like, oh, finally I'm retired, and travel is that much harder when you're older and you're not enjoying it as much. So do some of the stuff along the way too, once your financial picture is in a decent place. So I think now what everyone was wondering while I was making some of those comments is who's the saver and who's the spender in our relationship. So Marlon, Mom, you want to start first?
Well, am I the spender or the shopper? Because I like to shop, and
It's a good point.
it's sometimes I shop and sometimes I shop for things that I don't necessarily think that Dad would be interested in or they would be important. But if I bring them home, sometimes he agrees. If we were to discuss them in advance, he might try to talk me out of it. So I mean, I would bring it home, and then if it was something that really wasn't, he could talk me out of, then that could be, then that could be okay. But I'm a saver as well, because I was an early purchaser of a property, and I worked hard and all of that. But I would say I'm not necessarily a spender, as that I am a shopper and I like to buy stuff.
I beg
And I
to
think
differ.
that's a pretty big distinguishment there is the shopper, because from what I know about you guys and growing up in your house is that you handled most of the actual going out errands, grocery shopping, and kind of doing that as part of your duties around the house.
Right.
So I think that's also kind of a big distinguishment is shopper over just spender. Spender could kind of have a negative connotation to it.
Yeah. Well,
So
I've
does that
also
make
noticed a little change in that situation over the years with the online shopping stuff,
Mhm.
because I don't do a lot of online shopping. So if I'm going to do it, I go out and I go to the stores or whatever. But Dad now has access to be able to do shopping or spending right from his comfy couch. And so sometimes he makes purchases, and they're not things that I always want or agree with, but he can do that, and it's okay.
And and that's a good point, because a lot of times it's things that, I have the Amazon skill set, not that that requires much of a skill set, but we have this little candle heater light bulb, and it's got these little lamps in there that is specific halogen lamps that melt the nice smelly wax, and everybody probably knows what I'm talking about. And when those burn out, you'd have to go somewhere to like a light bulb store, or hopefully find one in Home Depot in 1,000 bulbs that they have there. Or you look at the number on the bulb, you type it in the Amazon box, and they're there 12 hours later. So I become the Amazon queen for the house. And sometimes and definitely the Amazon queen for the office, as anybody here can tell you. It's like, John, we need creamers. John, we need, International Delight, Almond Breeze creamers, and they're here the next day. And so I don't mind doing it. I like doing it. It's just easier than everybody trying to do it. So
Yeah.
division.
Yeah, and I think that kind of is what we think of when we think of our relationship, is that there's an aspect of saving and spending in both of us. So I think that, and I'll let Lauren share too, but I think we have our things that we like to either be a spender on, and if we're not spending on those things, then we end up being the saver. So
Yeah, I think we definitely both are a mix. One of my love languages is gift giving. So like I definitely fall guilty to that kind of often. Like if there's a sale and I know Taylor likes these shorts, like yes, I'm buying them for him, even if he doesn't need them. But I think in other aspects, I mean, I think I'm a pretty good saver. And then I think for you, like if the Eagles come out with a new jersey or something, like you definitely have to get it.
oh
But
yeah,
then
the Kelly Greens came out this year, and I was right on that.
3 jerseys.
Well, some of them were mess ups that they gave me for free, but
By the way, what did you do with the Carson Wentz jersey? You still have it?
I cut the name off the back.
Okay. Good. So I think, joint accounts are another issue, that we probably should talk about again and revisit, because we talked about how we've had these separate joint accounts, but you mentioned funding an account together, I think. And that's a big thing, I think, for younger people, that we're beyond that point where we need to do that. But I think for younger people, it's so imperative that they do that, because now, let's say you each have your own checking that you're paying some bills from, but you have that one joint account that each deposit $1,000 a month in. And from there, you use your debit card and you buy groceries with it. And then it forces you to both get together on the same page and look over that one account. And then together you could say, hey, we each put 1,000 a month in here. That's 24,000. We only spent 12,000 this year. Are we going to Fiji or are we going to the Caribbean? What are we doing with that $12,000? And so it's a really good way to create a team in that third account, for lack of a better way to call it, that third common account. So I just wanted to add that because it's something I meant to say before, and then I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, although we're merging our assets when it comes time for marriage, for now we have two separate individual accounts that our paychecks go into, and we pay for our bills and pay for our individual needs. And then we have that joint account where all the household groceries, utilities, and everything comes together and comes into play. So just piggybacking off of that, we're also trying to build a joint emergency fund. And I think emergency savings varies very much when you're in an actual couple, because in a couple, we now have two incomes. So God forbid we lost one income because somebody got laid off. The other one can help cover and support. So we don't need quite as big of an emergency fund. But I think that if God forbid we both lost our income stream, we would need a much bigger fund. But I think it's less likely that both of us would lose it at the same time. So I think that having that other person is really helpful. But I think it's also important to consider that once you end up in a situation similar to you, dad and mom, that one might be at home taking care of the kids, you might be back to one singular income again. And if that's the one income that you have that you're reliant on, you have to plan accordingly, and having that emergency fund again becomes that much more important.
Right.
Good.
That's
Good.
true.
I think we skip ahead now to, to needs versus wants, because we kind of covered, everything on accounts. And needs versus wants is really back to the budget again. And anybody that's done a budget with me helping them, I have 3 columns in there: needs, wants, and wishes. And needs are absolute mandatories. It's the rent or the mortgage. It's the car payment. It's the car insurance. In my opinion, it's the life insurance premium. It's if you have children, and these are absolute. The cell phone payment in today's day and age, you can't really live life without a cell phone, right? So those are absolute needs. Wants are things like, I want to go on vacation every year, and I want to upgrade my car in 3 years, and so you start budgeting some money to savings for that. And so there are things. So needs you have to have. Wants are things that life would be pretty miserable if you didn't meet some of those. So they're not things that are outright stretches. They're things that make quality of life. We want to go out to dinner twice a month or twice a week, or whatever that goal is. But wants are important. And then wishes. Wishes are things like, okay, we're going to budget every year for a vacation. And that vacation might be, 3 days in the mountain cabin nearby, or it might be Fiji. So you can budget some in each column, and then if it's a year that it works out, you can go on the big wish vacation. And then as a couple, we try to figure those things out, and sometimes we try to push each other toward. I like to push for more days. If I fly somewhere I spend more than 10 hours in an airport, I like to push for extra days. So even when we go to conferences on the East Coast, between connections and heading to the airport and getting to the hotel, I don't want to go to a 2-day conference and turn around and come back, so I want to go 4 days. I want to spend an extra day before the meetings start, and maybe a day after the meetings end. And that's something that Marlon has come around to, and I think embraced. The only difficulty is our disagreement on who's going to take care of the cats for how long, but usually it gets worked out pretty good. We have a lot of great people and friends and neighbors. So
yeah, and I think that's kind of like the big point there, is that when the lines get blurred between what is a want, what's a need, what's a wish, that's where some of those conflicts start to come up and say, hey, no, that's a need. Like, for example, I know for Lauren, like getting her nails done or hair done, like I would think that would be a want, but it's basically a need. And I think that sometimes those blurred lines really cause some of the additional conflict. So I think that really making purchases then without discussing them could get a little hairy sometimes in the relationship. I think it's a big source of conflict when those wants and needs get kind of blurred in between. So I think that, again, back to communication, I think if you can also pick a limit. If you want to say, hey, any purchase that one of us makes from our account that's over $100, $300, $500, like we need to have a discussion about that regardless. Or hey, if there's a new reoccurring purchase that's going to be happening, like any reoccurring purchases we need to know about so we can plan it into the budget, and just different ways like that to just avoid some of the conflict in there. So do we have any parameters or anything that we've set in the beginning of the relationship or when we started sharing, or is there a funny story about a time where one of us purchased something and didn't tell the other?
I mean, we both definitely fall victim to Costco, like pretty frequently. If one of us go to Costco by ourselves, we always come back with a bunch of stuff we didn't need, whether it's like food, or one time Taylor came back and surprised me with like beach chairs and an umbrella. Like, it can be whatever. But I think as far as like the needs, wants, and wishes go, I think with wedding planning, we've definitely started to see how blurry like those categories can get, just because what maybe is like a need or a want to one of us is, you know, the complete opposite to the other. So I think that's helping kind of start a lot of those conversations. And then as far as going forward, we've talked about maybe setting a limit to maybe you know, have a discussion if we pass, you know, $200 or something. But as of right now, it's kind of everything's a discussion with our joint account, so it hasn't really come up yet.
Yeah,
$200, the right
Costco-
cost of an Eagles jersey. That's where you set the limit, right?
Yeah.
Costco is the snacksidents, though. I call it a snacksident when I
Yeah.
go shopping hungry and I come back and I have a little extra treat in there. I'm like, oh, I had a snacksident at Costco.
Well, and the samples do you in too, right? So
Yeah.
you try to sample, say that was delicious. I'm going to get 2 boxes of those.
What about you guys on your end? Do you have limits or?
No, I don't think so. I think if there's maybe back in the day, but we didn't actually have a number limit. It was more of a, you know, we would discuss it and then
Is it necessary?
Is it necessary? Is it not necessary? Do we have to do it today? Can we do it next week? But we don't really buy anything big or major without discussing the other person.
Right.
I would never come home with a new car or anything like that.
Just a new cat, right?
Well, I think he knew about them all.
There was actually one cat I didn't know about, and it would have been 2 if our sister hadn't been rescued already. She went back to rescue that cat, both those cats, and the sister had been rescued, and she couldn't leave the other one there. So, but anyway, and you know, and the car is the big ticket item where, you know, next year, you know, the lease is up on her car, and so that's, you know, we've got decisions to make next year, and I kind of hinted before I said I wouldn't get into it, but you know, we don't want to have a leasing conversation now, but you know, there's always going to be the, you know, as long as one of us is or both of us are around, there's always going to be one of us that has an opinion that might differ a little, and we've got to be willing to listen to each other.
Yeah, and I think that pretty much wraps up the conversation for today. So thank you everyone for tuning into Financial Tides. Again, if there's any couple in your life that you think could benefit from hearing this conversation, please feel free to share it. And we look forward to you guys tuning in again next time. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
John Perillo and Taylor Perillo are financial advisors offering securities through Cetera Advisors LLC, a registered broker-dealer, doing insurance business in California as CFGA Insurance Agency LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera firms are under separate ownerships from any other named entity. California insurance licenses number 0F60123 and 0M90666, 6265 Greenwich Drive, Suite 251, San Diego, California 92122. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Advisors LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Cetera Advisors LLC nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice.